Hello everyone, and welcome back to another podcast. So this is the third podcast of a 3-day adventure. So if you haven't heard the last two podcasts, I'll just give you a wee quick rundown and you can go back and listen to them. So our adventure started when we left Edinburgh and we headed up to a little bothy called Caderly. Caderly Bothy is situated on the northwest coast of Loch Etive. We parked at the quarry and it's about a 4-mile walk. Nothing strenuous, it's pretty easy going out to the bothy. A single story bothy with 3 rooms, good fire, and the views around it are fantastic. We met a guy there who had cycled in, so if you fancy doing a cycle up to the bothy, it's possible as well. And we spent a lovely night there, and in the morning we headed off for our second day adventure, and that was to Rossoorie Bothy. Rossoorie Bothy is in a forest, and it feels very enchanted. We headed up from a little village called Straunton, headed north through some very winding, steep and narrow roads. Parked it on a forest track, and then we walked up to the bothy for a few miles, and then we're in this forest, heading to this little cottage. Single story again, 3 rooms, good fire, and it poured down all night. We had collected wood in the forest floor and stacked it up in the little room. So we were pretty prepared for our night. We ate well and had a pretty decent sleep actually. Very dark. So that's a little bit of a rundown of the little 2 bothies that we had been to. Absolutely fantastic. So day 3 is a remote beach. So as usual, if you want to go and get yourself a coffee and just sit back and relax and let me take you camping on the wild side. Scotland has an endless amount of beaches around its coastline. Far too many to count and name. But tucked away on the west coast on the northeast side of the Ardnamurchan Peninsula is a sandy coastline with a handful of beautiful beaches. And it's here that we are heading for our third and final day of our wild adventure. And when we reached there, we were blown away. But before I tell you all about that, we are in the car heading north, back through Straunton village. The road from Straunton was very scenic, and it was only a short 31 miles to our destination, so we headed west, passing through some lovely little villages, and we stopped in a little small village called Salin for a wee cup of coffee and a breather, and sit in the sunshine on this lovely morning. The Salin Hotel was fantastic, a great little place to stop for a rest, and some food, and even a place to stay if you were looking for that. It's very friendly and it was very peaceful. So after our coffee we were on the go, and we were heading north for a few miles and then headed west, heading for a little place called Arifgaig. This is situated on some very narrow single track roads. So passing here, it was just a mile to go to the little car park. We soon pulled up and looked for a space, which luckily there was a few. It can be a popular place, and the car park only holds between 10 and 15 cars, and there really is no other place to park. So my advice is, if you're coming here, best be early or turn up late afternoon. This is a fantastic little car park. It has great views all around, and I suppose you could park a camper van here if you wanted to, but bearing in mind there are no toilets or any facilities here, it's just a car park. As it was such a nice sunny day, we decided to empty the car and repack our rucksacks. There was a lot of stuff to sort out, so it was very important to take the right things. With all our things out the car and in piles ready to put in the rucksack, like food for the night, spare clothes, the tents, stoves, and all the usual things. But for this trip, we would also have to be carrying in our own water, as looking at the area on OS Maps, there didn't seem to be any fresh water sources around. Our water bottles were filled, and we were also taking a 5-litre container. Not what we would normally be carrying, but this was just purely because there was no water sources around. It took us about 10 minutes to sort the car and repack for our last wild camp. The car park was next to a grassy estuary bay with a mixture of seabirds, waders and woodland birds calling and chirping all around. A really nice place, even better if you're a bird watcher. Rucksacks up on our back, and already we set off for the 3-mile walk to one of the best beach camps I'd ever done. The walk was very relaxed. It was flat and pretty good underfoot. It did feel a long way to walk as we followed the road track all the way. Just a heads up that you can't actually get a car down this road. It's for the estate use only. It was a peaceful walk, and we had a great talk about all the wildlife and scenery that we came across. The walk is probably suitable for all people. Off-road wheelchairs and buggies would be a lot easier to use if you have them. And I promise you, you will enjoy this walk. Reaching a forestry section on either side of the road, the bird noises changed to all the twittering ones like sparrows and finches. We also heard the odd crow. A single track led off to the right, and according to the map, it was the one we had to take. The track was a man-made one, something like a shortcut instead of a path. It was wet and boggy in places, and it wasn't the best way to go, but we were on it, and we just had to follow it through the thick forest. We continued to meander following this so-called path. Our boots were getting wet as the sections of bog became harder to pass and walk through. We came into a clearing and bumped into a herd of red deer. Absolutely fantastic to see, but they got spooked and ran off into cover. It was a difficult path to use, and we both said we wouldn't be coming back this way, as our feet were now soaking wet. Through a small overgrown grassy track we came into a clearing and could see the sea a bit further out. Checking the map, we had hit the right bit. I turned to Charlie and said that we were here. I could feel and hear her relief. We walked forward and our jaws hit the floor. Wow! We stood there for a minute in pure disbelief as the beach opens up to golden sand. Untouched golden sand. The sun was out, the tide was in, and as blue as the sky. This was an actual dream. It felt like it. A desert island. Utterly beautiful. The Isle of Rum, an egg, and bits of sky were in view. By now our hearts were racing as to how stunning this place was. We took a small narrow track down to the beach. Deer hoofprints were dotted along a section, so that was good to know wildlife was around us. We had a glance at places to camp and seen that the tide had been up high, so camping on the sand would not be the best option. The hunt was on for a camping spot for 2 small tents. I went away right and let Charlie take some photos. I explored and looked for potential camping spots. I came across a couple, but only suitable for 1 tent, so I continued the search. I clambered up a little bit of rock section and came face to face with a fully grown red deer stag. It panicked, I panicked, and it ran off pretty fast as I stood there and didn't even know what had happened. I gathered myself quickly and turned around just in time to video it running across the sand, where it stopped across the other side to figure out what had just happened, just like I did. There was no potential camping spots at that side, so I headed back to see Charlie and have a look that way. We picked up the rucksacks and headed over to the banking where we had stood. Assessing the area, I noticed that there was raised sandbanks, which looked sturdy. We looked at each other and said the tents would fit side by side here, so this was our camping spot. We cleared away some stones that were in the way and got the tents out and put up. I was using the MSR Alexa one and Charlie was using the little Bobcat one from OEX. Both great little compact tents. I was actually trying something new, or more rather I'd seen as help for the Bobcat, and that was to use a trekking pole for the rear guy line. So you basically set a trekking pole to about 1 metre and put it in the ground at the back of the tent. You wrap the guy line around it and then peg it into the ground. And by doing this, it forces the guy line up and the tent out, which basically keeps the inner tent away from the outer, giving you slightly more room. So hopefully I've explained that a little bit easier. With both tents up, we stood back and looked at the views. We were getting absolutely stunning views from where we were. There wasn't a footprint on the sand, apart from our own and the deer's. We were alone. We didn't know it, but we would have this whole beach to ourselves. We sat on the sand in front of the tents admiring the stunning views that were in front of us. Charlie and I were very relaxed, and being alone here with the sun shining and the air was fresh, it was just perfect. We got the usual things sorted in the tents, with the air beds and sleeping bags, and emptied the rucksack with bits and pieces. It was now time for a cup of tea. Sitting on the sand with a pot boiling, we sat with a fresh cup of tea, thinking what to do and where to explore. So the area we were actually in was called Singing Sands. That was the main beach, which was away to our left. And between Singing Sands and where we were, there's a little collection of beaches, quite remote. I don't think they have any names, but the one we were on was absolutely stunning. With our cups of tea finished, we put them down, zipped the tents up and went for a wander along the beach. This little beach was about 200 metres long by 20 metres to the sea. Beautiful golden sands and waters. It was absolutely wonderful. We had a wander around to our left and then away to our right to see what we could see with our eyes. The sun was beaming and it was absolutely beautiful. The sea was as blue as the sky and the air was warm and fresh. We came back to the tents and got the fishing rod that I had brought. We thought it would be nice to go and give fishing a try and see what happens. There was no pressure. Casting from the rocks into the clear blue sea for about an hour to catch nothing. Not even a bite. So between myself and Charlie, we had no luck. But it's the taking part that counts. We can try again later on, if not tomorrow. There was plenty time. The sun was still beaming down, so we thought it would be a good idea to go for a swim. Charlie got changed and I got into my shorts and we headed down to the water. Charlie went in up to her knees, which was awesome, until I walked in, up to just covering my ankles. I jumped out the water very quickly. It was absolutely freezing. Charlie wasn't impressed and shaking her head. Then it turned to laughter as she was enjoying the paddling up to her waist, while I was still attempting to get into the water to cover my toes. I have to say fair play to Charlie, but it wasn't a day for me to be in the sea. It was Baltic. Oh, how much I regret saying to Charlie we should go for a swim. I hung my head in shame and went back to the tent to get the drone out to get some shots of Charlie in the water, enjoying herself. It was getting late afternoon. We were both changed and having another cup of tea to relax. We thought about a beach fire, so after our tea, we would collect some wood. We wandered around and collected loads of old wood and twigs that were just lying all over the place and brought them back and made a pile. We'd done a few trips like this until we had a good collection. and the next job was to snap them all into short pieces for easy handling. Making a scrape in the sand and away from the tents, we placed stones around the edge to contain the fire, and we were all sorted for tonight. With having such a productive day, we were now ready for some dinner, and the beach seemed to be the best place just to sit down and cook everything. The gas, water, mess tins and food were to hand as our stomachs rumbled on. Dinner tonight was spicy rice with smoked sausage through it, to bulk it up. It doesn't take long to cook, and again sat there looking out to the sea from this amazing spot we had. With our dinner on our laps, we didn't really speak. We just stared and looked out to sea. We sat there for ages. It was a good relaxing moment that we both had. You kind of just let your mind wander away and you just think of anything. It was so nice to be chilled, sitting there on the beach. Mess tins down and the water boiling for a cup of tea, listening to the waves as the tide gently moved in. It was a lovely moment as father and daughter sat on the beach. A little wander down to the sea to wash the cups and tidied up our dishes. The sun was soon disappearing and was amazing to watch. The colours changed from pinks to yellows to blues and orange. It was really mesmerising. The question arises so often about what do you like best, a sunrise or a sunset? A difficult one, and it's a very personal thing. I'm a morning person and I love to see in the new day, feel the heat on my face and the beams of light casting over everything. It's a magical thing. For the sunset, it's when things all settle down. The peace, the quietness, the colours. And it casts so many different colours as it hits the different clouds. So again, very magical. I think if I had to choose, it would be the sunrise. Just more because simply I'm a morning person. But it still is a very difficult question to answer. Having the privilege to watch the sunrise and sunset is a memorable thing. It's who you spend it with and where you spend it that also helps. With all that aside, I put the drone up again for a short time to capture some shots as the sun went down and lit up all the clouds around it, which turned out well. As darkness finally hid the sun, that was our cue to light the fire. Charlie's a dab hand at getting the fire lit, so it was over to her. With the fire soon crackling as the wood caught and created a lovely heat. Good job from Charlie, so I sat back and let her keep it going. The sky now was a deep dark blue colour, which was amazing to see as we sat watching the fire and kept warm by it. I had a surprise for Charlie that she didn't know about, and since we had a great little fire going, I thought it would be appropriate to have marshmallows. Her face lit up as I handed her the packet. I had put aside 2 small thin sticks, put a point on them to pierce it. Each of us armed with a marshmallow and a stick. We held them over the fire, heating them up until they were slightly melted and had that tinge of crispness on the edge. Long time since I've had a marshmallow like this. It was fantastic. We had such a laugh and it was great doing it while you're having a great fire. We didn't manage to eat the packet, but we did have a few marshmallows each. I find them quite filling. More logs on the fire made us feel really cosy in the night air. There was a large amount of sand lice hopping around us, and they all seemed to be heading to the fire. They are actually quite annoying and they do bite, so they can be rather itchy and horrible. You normally see them walking around, jumping about through the seaweed. Not the nicest little insects. Since they were all heading to the fire, that was them keeping away from us, which was a bonus. A few hours passed and the fire had plenty wood still to burn, which was a good thing. But we were actually feeling tired after a long day. A very eventful day, and our bodies were needing a good rest. So letting the fire die down to ash and burn out, I boiled the water for the hot water bottles and got them in our sleeping bags. I do like this time of night as you jump into your sleeping bag all cosy and find that comfy spot to drift off. We said our goodnights and zipped the tents up for the night. All we could hear was the waves from the sea as the tide came in, hoping that will make us sleep well. The night was peaceful, quiet and dark. I didn't sleep great, but it was better than I normally do. Maybe it's the sand underneath being a little bit softer, or creating a heat to sleep better, or even hearing the tide. Soon the daylight was lighting up the tent as I awoke. I could hear nothing, so rubbing my eyes and unzipping my sleeping bag, eased out of it and unzipped the tent. A fresh breeze hit my face. It was very still outside, and the sand showed the dark wet patch where the tide had reached. It was a lovely morning, and it was only about 6:30 a.m. on my watch. Trousers and boots on, I got outside and stretched, and I'm sure I heard a few bones cracking too. I took a little wander about and seen Charlie was up and away taking some photos of the morning. We waved at each other in the distance, and I stood there watching the sea and feeling the breeze on my face. Such a great feeling. I always find it better to put my sleeping bag away not long after I get up. No idea why, it's just something I do. So I tidy up before breakfast, so put my air mat, my sleeping bag away, my night clothes away. It's probably more a mental thing to make things easier to pack away later on. So once that was packed away, I got the water boiling for a cup of tea, just in time for Charlie coming back over. I had the Gore-Tex sheet laying out in the sand, keeping things in order and dirt-free. It was a perfect start to the morning. The sun was coming up, but since all the trees were behind us, it took a while to reach our spot. Breakfast this morning was tinned bacon, sliced and fried in a pan and put on a couple of rolls, along with a cup of tea. Charlie sliced the bacon while I sorted the cooking out and the rolls. Soon frying in the pan and our mouths watering, it was nice to be holding a cooked bacon meat roll in our hands. It's a good feeling that time in the morning, and very lucky with the weather. It was a stunning morning. With our bacon rolls all eaten and feeling full, we rested and chatted about our night and what our plans were today. Because we had plenty time, we thought we would have another try at fishing. So off we went. Charlie had a few casts and so did I, but nothing. I think it's because the water was so clear and nothing for the fish to feed from or hide from. The water was virtually crystal clear, just like some Caribbean sea. We spent about an hour trying before we gave up. It's the trying that's important, and it didn't really matter if we didn't catch anything. It's all fun. Back at the tents, we had one last cup of tea and worked out our day ahead. The sun had now hit our tents and started drying up the morning droplets that were on top. We soon got the tents down and packed away, rucksacks packed, and then the fire was covered over to leave no trace. The extra firewood was placed at the beach edge for someone else, or to let nature take it back. Then just out of the blue, a few spots of rain fell just as we were nearly finished packing up. So out with the waterproofs just in time, and soon the heavens opened up with a downpour. We had already decided we were not going back the way we came, so up with the rucksacks, and we headed off and followed the little path that took us in a different direction. So before we leave this little secluded bay, I have to say it was absolutely stunning. And at the start I said Scotland has endless amounts of beaches, and so many hidden ones, that most of us will never see them. We loved this little bay and everything around it, and it was fantastic to have it all to ourselves. We were very lucky. With one final look at the beach, even though it was raining, it was still a beautiful place. We followed the track that took us along the woodland edge, down onto the sand and along to the main beach called Singing Sands. Singing Sands, as I mentioned before, is the more popular side, and it's the first beach that you would come to. And it's still a great beach, but if it's peace and quiet you want, then you just have to walk that little bit further along. Back through the forest on the road, we were soon in sight of the car. The rain had stopped, and it was basically pointless taking the waterproofs off. So we kept walking to the car. Eventually reaching the car, and with the sun still out, we took off the rucksacks and had some juice that we left in the car. This is where our 3-day wild adventure would finish. I really do love making memories on all my adventures, and they're all different. So I have to say I'm glad my daughter Charlie came along with me to make things more special. So here we are at the end of another adventure. As always, you can check out the video for this on YouTube, and please do, so you too can see the most perfect beach ever. Thank you to Charlie for joining me on this adventure as well. Thank you to my Patreons and YouTube membership holders as always. Any music is from Epidemic Sound. If you're on social media, you can join me on YouTube, Camping on the Wild Side, Facebook, Camping on the Wild Side, Instagram, Camping on the Wild Side Scotland, and even TikTok at Camping on the Wild Side. And thank you to you, the listener, for joining me on my wild adventures. It's been a pleasure again as always. I'm Steve, and you've been listening to a podcast story from Camping on the Wild Side. Until next time, take care and cheers for now.